Welcome to Disney Deciphered, a podcast helping you save money, time, and stress as you plan your Disney vacation. On today's episode, Leslie talks to us about her recent trip to Disneyland and why she enjoyed Oogie Boogie Bash so much. Find all the episodes of this podcast at DisneyDeciphered.com, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you find podcasts, and we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a positive review. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can check us out on patreon.com/DisneyDeciphered, where you'll receive bonus content, or you can also support the podcast by using me as your travel agent. It'll be no cost to you, and I can help you plan your Disney or Disney Cruise Line vacation. Get started by emailing Joseph Chung at travelmation.net. If you have any questions for the podcast, email us anytime, DisneyDeciphered@gmail.com. Tweet at us at WWDeciphered on Twitter, or find us on Facebook and Instagram, Disney Deciphered. Thanks, and enjoy the show. Hi, I'm Joe from As the Joe Flies.
And I'm Leslie from Trips with Tykes.
And welcome back to Disney Deciphered. So Leslie is fresh back from her trip to Disneyland. She went to the Halloween party, which, say what you want about the two parks, I feel like it objectively, the Halloween party is better at Disneyland, but we will get to that in a little bit. If you would like to hear our live trip reports, I have a trip coming up in November for Wine and Dine Half Marathon Weekend at Walt Disney World. You can check us out on patreon.com/DisneyDeciphered. And we have some new patrons to thank before we get to the episode. So really just want to give a shout out and thank you to Matt M. and Jennifer J. for signing up recently. Thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it. And again, thank you to all of our patrons for following along with our silly trips and listening to our silly extra thoughts. All right, Leslie, let's get to this trip. You went over a weekend, and let's start by talking about, you had a little mini meetup with your Disneyland with Kids Facebook group, which has been referenced a couple times here in the past. But since you were there for a mini meetup, why don't you tell us a little bit about that Facebook group?
Sure. So about 5 years ago, I started a Facebook group with 3 other awesome Disney and family travel bloggers: Becca Robbins from This Crazy Adventure Called Life, Julie Big Boy from Mom Rewritten, and Jessica Sanders from The Happiest Blog on Earth. So check out their blogs as well. But we started this Facebook group just because we wanted there to be like kind of a community for families planning trips to Disneyland, because there are a lot of Facebook groups that are kind of for the annual pass holder crowd, for the Disney adults. And we kind of wanted to address all of the logistics, especially of sort of families traveling, from a lot of them out of town for like a longer vacation, and how to do Disneyland that way. And it's grown beyond our wildest expectations. We're like well over 30,000 members now, and just created a spinoff, Disney World with Kids. So you can get in early on that as we start to do more of the other Disney coast as well. But really just great, awesome ladies, and it's nice to be able to compare notes with other experts. You and I do it every day for Disney World, so it's nice to be able to have that for Disneyland as well.
Yes, come to the dark side for your Disney World with Kids spinoff Facebook group. And although we are normally on the dark side talking about the East Coast, or at least the dark side in Leslie's, this analogy has gone too far. You know what I'm saying. Leslie's more Disneyland focused, and we're going to talk about Disneyland today because you sounded like you had an amazing trip. So let's kick things off with what I alluded to, Oogie Boogie Bash, which is the Halloween party at Disneyland, which really seems to stand head and shoulders, or at least shoulders above Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween party at Disney World. And I think this is at the very least because of the amazing treat trails where you have some amazing character interactions. So tell us a little bit about Oogie Boogie Bash, and let's start with the treat trail since the Cocoa one is all the rage right now.
So the treat trails at Oogie Boogie Bash are definitely the highlight, as you said. And when they started this party back in 2019, they only had 5 of them, 5 of these interactive character treat trails. And now they've been so popular, they're up to 9. So each year they kind of put a new villain in several of them and bring back some of the most popular villains. And like you say, the really popular one this year is Ernesto de la Cruz from Coco, who you kind of have to see it to believe it. I put a couple of video clips on my Instagram stories. It's awesome. He has this mask on, but yet his face still moves. I don't know how they did what they did, but it's mesmerizing, and I kind of just wanted to stand there forever. But yeah, some other new villains that are really kind of deep cuts as well. Madame Mim from Sword in the Stone, and then also Mother Gothel from Tangled were the new villains this year, and they brought back some of the other ones that were popular last year. Agatha Harkness, Sid from Toy Story, Dr. Facilier was back. It was awesome. The treat trails are really and truly a highlight because you get your trick or treating in and you get your entertainment in all in one fell swoop. So it really feels quite efficient.
For someone who has only gone to Mickey's Not So Scary like myself, it took me a little while to realize that, there are trick-or-treating trails at Mickey's Not So Scary, but you just kind of walk outside of the Monsters Inc. one that they run sometimes where you can sit down for the show for a little bit. You're just kind of walking in, grabbing your candy and leaving. Whereas these treat trails, even if you're waiting in line, or maybe you want to wait because you are getting to interact with these villains. And it's weird to me that it is in California Adventure, which is where Oogie Boogie Bash is, and not at the Magic Kingdom, since ostensibly the Magic Kingdom has more space. That's something, we plan to talk about the differences between Disneyland and Disney World and why Disneyland gets all these characters, at least speculate about it in our next Unfiltered for patrons. So, we'll save that for then. Not that we really have any answers. It's mostly speculation. But for those of you who don't, like me, don't exactly get what these treat trails are, it is a trick-or-treating line, but you get this cool entertainment from these villains. And I think that's really great and should be in Mickey's Not So Scary.
Yeah, I don't understand why they aren't bringing it to Disney World, because it really, you feel like you're not waiting. Like you say, you want to watch the character while you're snaking in line, and you aren't as really focused on the candy and how long it's going to take for you to get the candy. And, I would not do the treat trails if I were solo. I mean, I really don't care about the candy. So I'm just doing it for the characters. So it's really awesome. And then it's also more efficient because the other thing they have are these character meet and greets. And the lines for those are really and truly brutal because everybody wants their photo and it takes time and you have to scan the PhotoPass card and all of that stuff. They had this year Bruno from Encanto and then also the Sanderson sisters as Disney characters. Minnie, Clarabelle, and Daisy were the Sanderson sisters from Hocus Pocus. And those were awesome and super popular, but the lines for those were 3 and 4 times as long as the lines for the treat trails because you just can't move people as efficiently through those.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, another thing that has been an issue, or I guess issue for guests, maybe not an issue for Disney, is that Oogie Boogie Bash sold out like in less than a month, maybe in less than 2 weeks.
No. So, less than 24 hours after public sale, Joe.
Oh, excuse me. So, I mean, Oogie Boogie Bash has been completely sold out. What has that done to crowds? Is it super crowded, or did you feel like, it's sold out because they had less supply for this premium experience? Yeah, right. But, what were the crowds like?
No, I definitely thought that they reduced the capacity just ever so slightly from the busier Oogie Boogie Bashes that I have attended. And it's sort of hard to gauge that compared to last year, with last year still being sort of pandemic year and different sensibilities. But it felt less crowded, at least compared to my first attendance in 2019. And, still some crowds for like the choke points, like I said, the Sanderson sisters and things like that. But I felt like for the rides, I could get on anything that I wanted, which was not the case the first year. And even still, the things that were the most popular, I was able to get through without crazy long lines, especially later in the party as crowds started to disperse a little bit. So that was, I think, part of it. I think Disney probably sold fewer tickets, but there's also been a lot of speculation that scalpers are starting to play a role this year. And I know Disney is really patrolling the resellers. And I do wonder whether some of the sellouts were a result of people trying to scalp, and Disney knows that and then thus is cracking down. So there's definitely been some chatter on some of the blogs, the news blogs, and in the Facebook groups about that. So do not resell. People have had their annual passes canceled this season about that, even just somebody trying to offload an extra ticket. So I would be very, very careful there. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to see, and it'll be interesting to see whether Disney wants to add more parties in future years. Because that's a bad guest experience for these things to sell out within 24 hours. Like at the end of June, people aren't planning their Disney vacations that early necessarily for fall. And it shunted a lot of people out of Disney vacations who would have, planned them otherwise.
Yeah. What is this, BTS? So I guess my last question is logistically, are you allowed into California Adventure early? Did you find that most people will spend the day in Disneyland and then come over? Or what is the best logistic practice for taking on Oogie Boogie Bash if you manage to get those tickets within 24 hours.
Just like with Mickey's Not So Scary, there's a mix-in period. So from 3 to 6 p.m., you're allowed to get into DCA early before the party starts, and the party then starts at 6 and everybody else gets kicked out. So the mix-in period is busy. I didn't feel like I could get a lot done. I did find out, though, that I was able to purchase paid Lightning Lane during that period. So I actually did, just to see if I could. And that's actually a nice little thing to think about.
For science. Thank you.
Yeah, for science. But, you know, that's actually really great. I purchased web slingers, which, you know, a lot of families might want to do that. Just, you know, throw the money at it, a little bit more money. What's more when these tickets are $150 or $170? But, yeah, I actually did like that, though, because if you really want to get in a popular ride like Radiator Springs Racers or Web Slingers, then, you know, maybe you can without a wait as well. So I use that mix-in period usually to eat dinner. Like I mobile order an early dinner, you know, before the candy craziness starts, and then, you know, just kind of see the sights and some of the other offerings. But it's not really that efficient for doing rides. Lines are pretty long.
And then how late is the party?
So the party goes until 11, and if you can stay until that 10 to 11 hour, you can really get a lot done. A lot of families come to this party and it's too late for their kids, and they find that out after the fact. And, you know, obviously their kids pass out in strollers and things like that, but a lot of families do call it a night and leave early, and that does make the lines quite short between 10 and 11. I mean, basically once that second parade happens, then a lot of families clear out. So I started doing some of the harder to do things while people were camped out for that second parade, and was able to get in a lot of the really popular things. I did get to meet Bruno, so we'll talk about that. No, bad pun. Sorry.
I got it.
No,
I
know.
it.
I had to.
I see what you did there.
I see what I did there. And then I got to go down Villains Grove, which I have kind of mixed feelings about. It's really beautiful for adults, but this is like almost like a dreamscape where there are a lot of lights that are suggestive of villains, but there's no characters there. It's really pretty, and the local super fans, you know, do rave about it. I think kids aren't very interested in it because they're like, where are the characters? But I got to kind of take that in this time without a long line, which I appreciated.
Nice. Well, from a late night at California Adventure to rope dropping Disneyland, let's move to your day 2. Just like a normal forced march of happiness, Leslie, bed late, up early. How early were you up for rope dropping Disneyland, and how early did you queue up?
So I got up at 6 a.m. So I went to bed at like 1 by the time I got back and recorded my trip report dutifully for our patrons. But yeah, so it was a short sleep, but I got up at 6 and headed out the door a little before 7. So was queued up for security just before they open. They usually open, I think, at 7:15-ish. So I was there maybe 7:20, something like that. So I was there a little bit before they opened the security gates. Got right through, was right at the Esplanade, you know, close in to the lines, got almost to the front of the rope. So, and I was just watching kind of what was happening with the early entry guests that morning, because this is the first time I've been back to Disneyland since Disneyland brought back early entry for on-property hotel guests. I was kind of curious, does it affect rope drop? Is it, you know, going to make certain lines long, or am I going to see it? And I wasn't even aware of it. That they sort of shunt the early entry guests off to the side towards Tomorrowland, right by Plaza Inn, and I didn't see that many people. So that was kind of nice to see, and it certainly didn't seem to affect the lines that I experienced. I mean, I didn't go to Peter Pan. That's the one ride that, unless you're very, very first, then maybe you don't want to go to in Fantasyland. But I did go to plenty of other rides in Fantasyland, and they were no different than they were on my last visit.
Yeah, and to clarify, early entry mattered because you were staying off-site on this trip, so you did not get early entry. The on-site Disneyland hotel guests got 30 minutes early entry. Oh, random tip, by the way. I've heard rumors that if you're staying on site, they have like 75 Oogie Boogie Bash tickets in the morning, like at 6 a.m. I don't know if that's true or not, but
it's true.
If you're looking for the tickets. Okay. So, if you're looking for the tickets, go ahead and get those. But anyway, if you're staying on site, you get an extra half an hour head start. Reminder for those of you who forgot, Disneyland's, a lot of their, in fact, the majority of their Fantasyland attractions do not have Genie Plus at all. And even though, Leslie, you had Genie Plus on this trip, if you want to ride Alice in Wonderland's Peter Pan, which of course you skipped, Snow White, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, even Dumbo, you can't do that with Genie Plus. So it's interesting to hear that early entry didn't really affect your lines outside of Peter Pan. Although I guess since there's only 3 Disneyland on-site hotels, maybe that is why that happened. So what was your Genie Plus experience?
So my Genie Plus experience was very similar to the last trip I was there, like shooting fish.
Still fish in a barrel?
Yeah, fish in a barrel. I mean, we
need a new metaphor. I mean,
I guess so.
This using the shooting fish in a barrel metaphor has become shooting fish in a barrel for Disneyland Genie Plus.
That's true. That's true. So it was really quite easy, and I wasn't working the system that hard because, like I said, I was there for this meetup. So I had a lot of little events during the day where I was meeting people in the park and wasn't really trying to go that hard on the rides, but was just trying to work the system enough to see what the state of it was. And it was still quite easy, was able to do the Fantasyland rope drop while I kind of waited a little bit to book that first Genie Plus. And the first one I booked was Haunted Mansion Holiday for something like about a 9:30 return time, somewhere around there. I can't remember exactly, because that is the most popular attraction in Disneyland Park during Halloween time, because everyone wants to see the Nightmare Before Christmas ride overlay. So it does kind of change your strategy during this time of year. Indiana Jones, of course, is also the other by far most popular attraction to get. So those are the 2 that you need to start your morning prioritizing, which I wasn't riding Indy that day, so I didn't focus on that one. But yeah, I mean, as long as you sort of know what to get first with Genie Plus, then you can really devise an awesome strategy. I did meet a couple from Canada at some point later in the day who didn't understand the 2-hour rule, and it broke my heart because they wanted to get Indiana Jones and they saw, at some point mid-morning, gosh, it has a return time of 6 p.m. I won't be able to get another ride for 8 hours. And my heart broke because I was like, no, if your return time is, that much later, you can get your next Genie Plus no more than 2 hours later. And they didn't understand it. And they missed their chance to really maximize Genie Plus. So it's just vital.
So did they miss the entire 8 hours, or
yeah.
at least did you catch them like 4 hours?
I don't know. I don't know if they didn't book it because it was 8 hours later and they wanted to get something else, or if they did and then were shut out of everything else. They didn't try. But in any event, they just fundamentally misunderstood the rules of Genie Plus. And like, they weren't clueless. They had done research. They, it just, the rules are so nuanced that I think if you're new to this, maybe you didn't do Max Pass and remember that legacy rule, then, you might miss it.
Has Disneyland updated its app like Disney World to have at the top of your tip board it tell you when the next time you can book is?
Yes, that is there, but it wasn't. Yeah, it's just on the tip board.
It's not a huge notification, so I can see why people would still miss it. But if at least there's that, maybe it'll help some people.
Yeah, but if you don't book it in the first place, you don't get it. So that's the thing. So if you don't think to book something, then you won't see it there. So I guess you have to give it a go and then wait for that notification to be there. But yeah. Unfortunate.
Disneyland with Kids Facebook group, everyone.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this podcast, I'm pretty sure you already have that under control. And so I was texting with you on the day, and you were kind of grousing about, you're not as into fireworks spectaculars and nighttime shows as I am, and you were grousing about having to stay for Halloween Screams, for work, quote unquote. But then you texted me back saying that it actually ended up being a pretty good show. And I didn't even know before you went that Disneyland has a separate Halloween fireworks show. So that was pretty cool news to me as well. So tell us about Halloween Screams.
Sure. So Halloween Screams used to be the Halloween show that was played during Mickey's Halloween party back before Oogie Boogie Bash, when the party was in Disneyland Park. So they have just kept it on and switched over the fireworks shows during regular nights just to give, I think, a lot of the guests a taste of Halloween who aren't able to go to Oogie Boogie Bash. I don't know how hard it is to change these fireworks shows nightly and whatnot, but apparently not that hard if they're willing to do it. So I did get to see the show. And yeah, I'm not a huge fan of like shows and nighttime spectaculars. I'm a ride girl, but I did do it for the sake of research, like you said. And it was great. It actually is a very good fireworks show. A lot of fun, a lot of villains. The projections on Main Street are excellent. I camped out just a couple of storefronts down Main Street from the hub so that I could see some of the projections in my peripheral vision, but could still be pretty close to the castle. And I had to get there about 45 minutes to even just get a spot. And it was really crowded. I mean, the thing that was a big negative about this was the crowds. Everybody wanted to see Halloween Screams who was in the park. And after it ended, it was just a sea of people. And I was trying to get back to Splash Mountain to beat the crowds to Phantasmic, because a lot of people, there are two Phantasmic shows on either end of Halloween Screams. So a lot of people, go to the fireworks and then try to catch the second Phantasmic show. So they're headed through Frontierland and Adventureland to get there. And that was just wall to wall people not moving, which was not fun. So that's something to think about. But the show was worth it. I'm glad I saw it. I had a lot of fun. Definitely worth seeing it, because I do wonder, like, will they keep doing this every year? This was, like I said, the Halloween party fireworks, and maybe they will if it's so popular, but you never know.
How early did you have to get to the Main Street or the hub if you wanted a good spot for fireworks? And in terms of that huge crowd, would have been better if you had just left the park?
I mean, people camp out for the fireworks several hours in advance, and I wasn't going to do that. Like, if you want a prime view in front of the castle, then you've got to be, I don't even know, 2-3 hours, maybe more. So by the time I walked up at about 45 minutes in advance, I mean, the hub was pretty much full. So, and there were people all along Main Street USA, but they had not yet filled in the street. So I was able just to sit kind of like one person in from the curb, like on the street. And then at some point they come and they make everybody stand up, and then they fill in the street. So that worked for me. But 45 minutes, that's as long as I'm going to wait. That's like my max. I probably could have gotten the same spot 30 minutes in advance, but not much more than that. And yes, I probably could have left the park more easily than I could have going back into the park. If I was going out instead of in, it would have been less of a crowd crush. But it was still a lot of people, a lot.
All right, so let's move on to California Adventure. On your last day, did you rope drop again?
So no, this was a late start, a rare late start for me, because we were doing a breakfast meetup at the Courtyard, one of my favorite hotels. We were doing that for our group members. So I did not get to rope drop, but it was actually a great strategy, because I, got a chance to test out doing Disneyland, or I guess doing DCA, the way that normal people do, sometimes sleeping in. So it was a challenge, and I was up to the challenge. And I proved to myself that even on a pretty busy day, I think it was like a 6 out of 10, according to touring plans that day, that,
This was a weekend, right?
Yeah, weekend. It was a Saturday morning. It's entirely possible to do DCA or do Disneyland getting a late start, as long as you employ some of the strategies available to you. So I sort of think about the strategies at Disneyland that are available. There's rope drop, there's Genie Plus, there are single rider lines, and you don't have to use all of them. I feel like at Disney World, you have to use all of them if you really want to dodge crowds and get in a lot of rides in a single day. And at Disneyland, I think if you use 2 of the 3, you're okay. I guess you can throw in paid lane on top of that as well. And I decided to sort of do a combination of a little bit of Genie Plus with single rider lines, and then just looking for the rides that still had pretty short lines, even getting a late start. So I got into the park at 9:10. It was an 8 a.m. opening, of course, with guests with early entry getting in at 7:30. And I went first to Radiator Springs Racers. The single rider line had a 12-minute wait and was right.
You timed it?
Yeah, I timed it. It was, they told me, I asked the cast member as I got in, like, what do you think? How long? And they said, about 10 minutes. So I timed it
And I really feel like early in the morning is the best time for that single rider. Even later, it's still not super bad, but yeah, that was my experience too.
Yeah, because so many people who are rope dropping want to stay with their families, and so they're not breaking off. And then the locals use single rider the most at Disneyland, and they're not getting there first thing in the morning. A lot of them live, traffic, they're an hour plus away. They're just not there at that hour for the most part. So yeah, it's a great time to use single rider. So I did Radiator Springs Racers, and then I did single rider at Web Slingers. Also, I mean, essentially it was a walk on. I did the pre show. And then when I got in the single rider line, I was the fourth person waiting. So it was just a matter of a minute or two. And
Nice.
then from there, I went over to Pixar Pier, and I had a Toy Story Lightning Lane that I could have redeemed right away. But I realized the line for the Pixar Pal Around, the big, Ferris wheel, was building very quickly at that hour. Like I knew if I waited 15 more minutes, it would be much longer. So I went a little bit past Toy Story, went ahead and went on the swinging gondolas for the Pixar Pal Around, had an under 15-minute wait for that, which was great, and then backtracked to Toy Story to redeem my Lightning Lane, at which point...
Okay.
Yep, sorry.
Okay. I need to ask you about Pixar Pal Around. It looks nausea-inducing. Oh, can you explain Pixar Pal Around to people who don't know what it is?
So it's a Ferris wheel, and there are regular static, gondolas on it, or I guess maybe they swing a little bit. I don't remember if the static ones swing a little bit, but they're safe. It feels like a regular Ferris wheel. And there are ones that are swinging that are on basically like a miniature roller coaster track, and they like go all the way to the edge of the Ferris wheel, then they come back and then they swing like I don't even know. And a lot of people are really terrified by these swinging gondolas, like super, super terrified, like more than a roller coaster, which I don't get, but people have different, phobias and fears of heights and things like that. So I wanted to do it. And I did ride with two very nice ladies from Orlando. And one of them was deathly afraid and was doing it for her mother or sister, whoever she was with. And so I guess I got that perspective. But yeah, people have very strong feelings about the swinging gondolas.
All right, well, let's continue on. What happened after Toy Story Mania?
All right, after that, then continued around, hit Inside Out Emotional Whirlwind, and then made my way to Goofy's Sky School, where I also used single rider, and I was the only person in the single rider line. And at that point, the wait was like 30 minutes, and they don't always open single rider there. Like if there's no wait, they don't open it. And if there's too long of a wait, they don't open it because they don't have places for people to really queue for the single rider line to get that long. So it was glorious. It was the best. And so, yeah, I mean, just really running the table here, doing a ton of rides with that late start. Then went to Golden Zephyr, which is right across, and then made my way to Soarin', where I had a lightning lane to redeem at 11:30 a.m. So if you're doing sort of the math, I started at later than 9 a.m., and by 11:30 I was on Soarin'. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rides in 2.5 hours.
I mean, that's a really good deal. And then I'm guessing you just stacked lightning lanes for your afternoon, or did you take it easy in the afternoon?
So I had some lunch meetings and some things to do blogger wise. So I took a big break. We were actually going to go see, after lunch, we went to see a musical celebration of Coco with the group as part of a meetup. So I basically knew I wasn't going to be riding anything from noon until, say, 2:33. So I used that opportunity, yes, like you said, to stack lightning lanes over in Disneyland, the things that I hadn't done the first day or the things that I wanted to do again. And this is really where the strategy is super, super powerful, because at Disneyland, yes, there are certain rides where the return times get pushed much, much later. But there are a lot of rides where the return times remain close to instantaneous until dinner time or later. So there's a strategy you can use, which is basically you want to book first as you're stacking the most popular ride that has the latest out return time. And then you want to backfill the space before that with the rides that have closer in return times. So I booked first Indiana Jones. It had a 4:30 return time when I booked it. The next thing I booked was Space, which did have a little bit later return time, 5:40 when I booked it. But then I started being able to backfill. I could book Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run for a 4:15 return time. And then I scanned into that first, which made me eligible immediately for the next Lightning Lane, was able to book Thunder for 7:40. So I was sort of able to do a combination of stacking, but also the mad dash, right? Because the last thing I booked was almost instantaneous, which made me eligible again. And then I could continue to book things that were near instantaneous as long as I was using them. So it was great.
Yeah, that's really nice. And it's great that, Genie Plus works as intended at Disneyland. Let's finish the night up at World of Color, which I did not get to do because it opened like the weekend after we left in April. Since it just came back since my last trip, tell us what World of Color is for those who don't know. And, is it worth seeing? I know it's a nighttime show, Leslie, so maybe it's not that great for you.
It's a nighttime show over in California Adventure. It's set on the pier, actually on the water in front of the pier. They have water spouts and sprays, and they project images and play music onto the sprays of water, all lit up with different beautiful colors. And I actually really like the show as far as I like nighttime spectaculars. The thing that's a little bit tricky about it is a lot of the viewing areas are not great. There are things kind of in the way of getting a clear view of everything. So, even I've done before, there's a dessert party for it as well. And even with the dessert party, you sometimes have a view that has a little bit of obstruction. But the way they're doing World of Color right now is they actually have a virtual queue for the 2 different nighttime shows that you select in the app. You have to be in the park to be able to select it, and they're released at noon every day. And I actually I set an alarm on my phone for 11:55, but I was setting an alarm for so many other things like Genie Pluses and like meetups and things like that when it went off, I thought it was my mobile order pickup time, and I forgot it was for World of Color.
We've all been there, Leslie.
Yeah.
all the over planners have been there.
So I forgot to book the virtual queue, but there is some space where along the bridge into Pixar Pier where they let people who are slackers like me stand. It's a little bit of a side view, but it's still pretty good actually. So if you miss that chance, don't fear. There is a chance to just walk up, and I did walk up. Maybe 20 minutes in advance, maybe a little bit more than that, and was able to get a pretty decent spot. But it's not great in terms of the viewing area. And I did leave before it was finished just to beat the crowds because my feet were done. I just couldn't stand anymore. I did 67,000 steps in 3 days. So my feet just, the standing is the worst part. I was done. But I'm glad I saw it.
Don't use your Fitbit as an excuse for nighttime spectacular hating, Leslie, please.
I saw most of it.
Yeah. Yes, you got the gist. Speaking of all those steps that you took, let's finish this long journey of your, it was a short trip. And again, this is why Disneyland can be so great. You were only there for 3 days, and obviously you got a ton done, pretty much did everything you needed to do in both parks. But, what are your kind of takeaways from what Disneyland is like since you haven't been there for a few months? How are things looking at Disneyland Resort?
So Genie Plus, like we say, fantastic. So that is the lesson. It's worth it. It's just worth paying for it there, no question. The thing that I did notice that was sort of more in the negative column was that a lot of the rides have got some serious maintenance issues. We've been talking a lot about downtime. I know one of our favorite Disney podcasts, Disney Dish, Lynn Test, has been talking about just the downtime for all of these rides and the reliability really being a problem. And I did notice that Indiana Jones is having a whole lot of issues, a lot of downtime. I got a multi-lightning lane for that when it went down, when I had it booked for my last day. And then I did ride Splash Mountain because I thought it might be my last chance to ride it before it converts to Tiana's Bayou Adventure. And it was in a really sad state. Like there was a whole section of the ride that was dark. There were no lights on, and none of the animatronics worked in that section of the ride. Like it was embarrassing. I cannot believe that Disney was running the ride at all looking that bad. And then I also noticed Radiator Springs racers. There are a lot of the cars in the dark part of the ride that are supposed to move forward and then move, and they aren't moving forward anymore. They're just static, and then, they're doing sort of the animatronic part of them, but they're not actually, they don't have the full range of motion. So that was kind of a bummer to see. I hope they start to fix some of these things, but, then again, this is the company that has the Yeti that hasn't worked in how many years, right?
That's an engineering issue. Okay.
Okay.
Apparently, the rumor is that Expedition Everest will sink into the ground 1 inch per. It was sinking into the ground or something. That's why it can't move. But I don't know if that's substantiated or not. Yeah, no, that's what they said. And I know I've talked about this just within the last couple episodes, but Radio Harambe specifically asked Joe Rohde about it, and he made it sound like it is something that could be fixed, but it would take a lot of, I think it sounded like the engineering solution is just going to be way too much to make it worth it. And he did make a good point, which was all the kids who have been grown up in the last 20 years, they didn't know the Yeti ever moved. So the strobe light Yeti is what they've known. So not that excuses Splash Mountain not working. They're probably not bothering to fix it since they're going to take it down in a couple months, or Radiator Springs having those issues. I mean, Disney really needs to get their stuff together. On that note, though, I read an interesting article about this where Lentesta was quoted, and they were saying that because of the pandemic work supply issues, a lot of that institutional knowledge has been lost. Again, Joe Rohde, he's gone, right?
Yeah.
So, you've lost people. So still, I think they need to figure it out. All these ride breakdowns are not, it's just not good for the guest experience. And one of these days, one of these things is going to catch up to Disney, if not all of them.
For sure. Well, before we get to the Disney do or don't, I do want to add one more positive thing, even though I want to end it on a negative note. One thing I noticed from this trip is just how many Halloween offerings there are at Disneyland, even if you don't have an Oogie Boogie Bash ticket. So I think a lot of people, felt really disappointed and not able to get the tickets this year. But I think it's important to know that you can still really experience Halloween at Disneyland, even if you don't have that party ticket. You have Halloween Screams. There's actually a Villains Dance Party for younger kids on the Tomorrowland stage. You've got Miguel doing meet and greets in Frontierland. And I think Mirabelle is there as well. I didn't see her, but she has been there. So I'm assuming she's been there as well. And then you have the Plaza de la Familia and the musical celebration of Coco show over in DCA. And that is a gem. I put a little video clip on my Instagram stories in a highlight. So go take a peek at that, because grinning ear to ear is all I can say. And I'm not a show person, but it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. So that's a great way to, get to celebrate Halloween. And then the Dapper Dans sing Halloween songs. So it's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and we know you love Dapper Dans. And we also know you love a Disney do or don't. So thank you so much for sharing your experience at Disneyland this past weekend. Why don't you share with us a Disney do or don't from your trip?
So I would say for people who visit Disney parks like me fairly often, you probably have your favorites and the things you do again and again and again. And as a result, you probably have things that you never do. So my Disney do or don't would be do those attractions, the ones that you skip trip after trip after trip. Go back to them, revisit them. I did, like I said, Golden Zephyr at DCA on the pier. I did the Main Street vehicles, like on the omnibus. I don't think I've been on a Main Street vehicle since I've birthed my first child. So more than 13 years. And I also went again on the Storybook Land canal boats, which I'm really glad I did, because I had just done that ride at Disneyland Paris and was able to sort of really do the comparison side to side. So do those things. I did both nighttime spectaculars. I didn't do Fantasmic. I really can't stomach the crowds at Fantasmic, but I did the fireworks and I did World of Color. So do those things that you don't always do. Like I said, some of these turned out to be really big highlights for me. So give that a shot.
Yeah, great tip. Although Golden Zephyr looks like it would not do well with my vertigo. But other than that, I totally agree. always try the things that you generally skip. Well, Leslie, thank you so much for sharing your trip. Really appreciate it. I know some listeners have been emailing me that they will be going to Disneyland in this fall. So if that's you, hopefully these tips have helped you. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And other than that, Leslie, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And I will see you lobbying Bob Chapek to bring Ernesto de la Cruz to Magic Kingdom.
Thanks, Joe.